It metamorphosized its look into a demon. My name is Rob. Actually, Bigfoot Michigan Rob is kind of my handle name that I got. Um, I guess, the search for Bigfoot. See, I happened on to being involved with cryptids and Bigfoot back in 2018. First, from a little background with me, growing up, like a lot of kids, my dad introduced me and my brother into like monster movies. It was like the first one wasn't really a monster movie. It was Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman. And then we kind of started watching, the Dracula, the old Dracula with Bela Lugosi, then Lon Chaney with the werewolf, Boris Karloff, Frankenstein's monster. So yeah, as a kid, that's what my brother and I started watching. My dad was a big fan. So throughout life, I was always interested in monster movies growing up, Godzilla, all the way, the whole 9 yards throughout life, even through marriage and everything else. And one day I was watching In Search of, it was Leonard Nimoy, and they had cut ups of the Patterson Gimlin film about Bigfoot. So I'm like, wow. So back then, this is pre internet, of course. I remember going to the library, and I know that I was in grade school. There's nothing in the library about Bigfoot. I might have found like a book about Bigfoot, but it was like a comic book or a cartoon book. Nothing good. So later on in life, as I got older, I started to go to like the college university libraries. I went to University of Michigan. Wasn't really a big researcher into it. In fact, I'm in the podcast business now. I conduct interviews, and I have a channel called Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, which I kind of fell into. We do live shows. I do two a week. I put out videos. It's kind of more of a support group because I started this for a couple of reasons. And number one is how I happened to cross a Bigfoot June 15th of 2018. I go to Cindy. I said, hey, I rented us a cottage at Lake Cadillac, Michigan. I'm an outdoorsman. Cindy, not so much an outdoors girl. So it's like, hey, look, you got to, help me out here, at least during the summer. Let's go do some camping. I tell you what, you don't want to be in a tent. I rent us a cottage. I rent us a small fishing boat. I'm going to show you how to fish. She reluctantly agrees. So I'm all smiles. So we head out to Cadillac, Michigan. It's about a 3.5, 4 hour trip from where I live in the state of Michigan. Pulled up maybe 7 in the morning. I think it was the middle of the week. Got everything together, got out on the boat, went fishing. So Lake Cadillac, very big lake. It's surrounded by a lot of beautiful homes. It backs up to the Manistee National Forest. Now, around Lake Cadillac, there's also outside of homes, there's small businesses, mom and pop stores. It's a very nice little community, a lot of cool shops. So I knew she would like that for later. We get out about our day. I'm setting up the fishing gear, the tackle. We're going about the lake. So we're not catching anything. We're not getting a nibble. We're getting nothing. I can tell Cindy's getting bored. So I said, let's do some exploring. Then it's a beautiful day. So we're driving the boat, and I find this canal, and I go through this canal. Now, this canal takes us to another lake that's connected, and it's another sizable lake called Lake Mitchell. Now, when we hit Lake Mitchell, this is now more, I think, what we wanted to experience. It wasn't quite as built up. Were there houses? Yes. Was there picnic areas? Yes. But as we traveled southwest, it just backed a beautiful scenery to now you can see the forest in plain view. It's nothing but the depths of the forest. So I get down to like I guess you would call it a bay. They call it Mitchell Bay. So I'm about 90 feet from shore. and we're kind of drifting. And I says to Cindy, okay, let me put our bait and tackle together and we can do some fishing. I said, I feel lucky we're going to catch some fish. So about 2 minutes into it, she's standing up looking toward the beautiful shoreline into the woods. My head is down. And then she says, hey, Rob, somebody is throwing rocks at the boat. I'm like, really? And I look up, I don't see anything. Now, when I look up, all I see is the backdrop of the forest. And you have to remember, this forest goes right up to the water's edge and it drops straight into the lake. So there's really not a beach area. Sure, are there some spots you could stand? Yes, but to throw a rock 90 feet, there's not enough room for your arm, right? To get that angle to make an accurate toss. I said, don't worry about it. It's probably some fish jumping around. So again, I go back to putting our tackle together. And again, I'm not paying any attention. I'm looking down into the boat. Cindy, again, Rob, someone is throwing rocks at the boat. I get up, I look, I said, look, I'm kind of like Cindy. I don't see anybody. I tell you what, hold off on this rock throwing business. Let me get the tackle together and then I'll join you and we can look together. She's like, yeah, whatever. So I again go back to the bait and tackle. Now, for whatever the reason, I look up, excuse me, I look up towards the sky, and there's an object falling out of the sky. I'm like, what is this? And as it got closer, it falls about 3 feet, 4 feet in front of the boat, kerplop. It is a rock. It's the size of a baseball. So I turned to Cindy to kind of apologize and tell her, hey, you know what? There is somebody launching rocks. But when I see Cindy, she's standing there, asphyxiated at the shoreline. This is June 15th. She already has a nice tan. She's a sun worshiper. So again, full tan. I tell you, from head to toe, her body was white, lost all color. And I'm like, what in the world is she looking at? And then I looked to the shoreline. Again, 90 feet from shore, standing there in between like two trees is about a 9 foot humanoid looking thing. I say humanoid in the beginning, but I will tell you this. It was covered from head to toe in hair, reddish brown hair. I said it had to be at least 9 feet. It had to be at least 4 foot wide. This thing is humongous. Its arms and hands are on its side. And I look at this face. Well, first of all, the entire body is covered in this long, shaggy hair. The chest, however, was kind of not as hairy, and you could tell that it was kind of grayish. And the face was a gray face. And I could fully see this. And the thing, it kind of gave me chills because when I say humanoid here in the beginning, it's because this looked like a person. It looked like a human being in the face. However, the odd thing about it is, and I always tell people I don't mean to say this, but this is the best way I can describe this. It looked like a person with Down syndrome. I mean, the face was really odd. The the eyes weren't parallel to the bridge of the brow. They were offset. One eye drooped down, kind of big eyes. It had a flattened nose, and then it had this mouth, and it was kind of a crooked mouth, but it looked like a human being. I'm like, what in the world is this thing? Now, as I stated earlier, the arms and the hands are on its side. So then he raised his arms from the side, almost paralleling the river's edge, or I shouldn't say the river, the lake's edge. A creek ran back through here too, by the way, called Mitchell's Creek. So there's a lot of this. Probably, I'm guessing how it got there. But anyway, but the thing that really was petrifying, this thing that looked like a Down syndrome humanoid looking person, when it paralleled the arms to the lake, this jaw dropped. It's almost like the jaw detached from the mouth there. It dropped a good 6 inches. Now, and the mouth is now in gaping. It's open. It's almost like you could fit a bowling ball in it. That's how big it is. If you remember back when we were kids, depending on your age, one of the big games was Pac-Man. It reminded me of that. And inside the mouth, it's kind of dark, and I see like a set of teeth. There was like two on the top. There was two like oversized like German Shepherd type teeth. I mean, they weren't like a wolf's teeth, but they were canine. And on the bottom, there's two like teeth more closely together coming up. And the thing about this is when it dropped the jaw, opened this large mouth, we're staring. It bellows back. It's almost like his head dropped beneath its shoulders, and from its insides, it's mustering up something. And all of a sudden, emanating from its mouth is this huge combination of a roar, growl, and like a scream, like a curdling scream, and it's projected towards Cindy and I. This is so powerful that I feel the reverberation inside my body. In fact, it is so powerful that Cindy about 5'2", 109 pounds at the time, not a very big boat, feels this reverberation as well, and she falls off of the boat into the water. Now, the thing that really scared me is when it let this sound out and when it went back, that face, it tightened, that Down syndrome looking face, it tightened. It got dark, almost like a deep gray purple, but it metamorphosized its look from that Down syndrome humanoid person into what I today, still today, 5 years later, call a demon. And that squeal, that screech was like nothing I've ever heard. And it was like three sounds emanating at once. And we get this blast. I go to my right to get Cindy and get her in the boat. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, the beautiful backdrop of Manistee National Forest, the greens of the trees, everything seems to dull. I look to the sky. The blue sky is gray. I mean, I'm it's like I'm looking through a filter, but I'm also paralyzed. I don't know if I'm paralyzed with fear, if I got hit with something from this creature. I cannot move to my right to get Cindy. I'm frozen. And in my head, I start shaking my head, trying to say, Rob, snap out of this. I snapped out of it. That filter was gone. Now I can see normal again. I reach in, I get Cindy into the boat, and I look to shore. This is where I'm as scared as I was. I'm even more scared because now I look back to shore. This thing is gone. I turned the boat around and I sped across out of that bay, across Lake Mitchell to that canal, sped all the way across Lake Cadillac, get all the way to the area where I launched the boat. I wrap a towel, a blanket around Cindy. She's shivering. I immediately look for a restaurant or a bar, the closest thing that we can go sit down inside, about a half block up after landing the boat, docking the boat. I find this bar. It's about the middle of the day, 12:30 maybe. There's hardly nobody in this bar, which I was grateful for. I go in, I turn to my left, and back in the far left corner of the bar, there's an empty table, maybe two, three people in this entire bar. Barmaid comes up. What you guys having? Cindy, not a drinker, says I'll have a bottle of Bud Light and a shot of Jack Daniels. I like, wow. I look at the barmaid. I said, yeah, I'll have the same. Make mine a double. We're sitting there. Still, we don't say nothing. We're kind of looking at each other. We wait for our drinks to arrive. Cindy takes that shot of Jack Daniels, takes it down like she's been drinking for 20 years, washes it down with a bottle of Bud Light. I do the same. Cindy says to me, Rob, what do you think that was, honey? I said, honey, what do you think it was? She replies, now you got to remember, we've never spoken about, as a couple, we never spoke about Bigfoot. She knew I was into stuff, but we never spoke on these things. She goes, I think it might have been that Bigfoot creature. And I'm, and I retort back, yeah, I think it might have been. I still had my doubts because I still cannot process the transformation, the metamorphosis, right? From this human looking thing into a devil, a demon. So she says, should we contact the DNR, call the police, report this thing? I says, you know what? This story sounds like a story for one. We'll be leaving a bar and we're going to contact somebody on this. I said, I think we best leave it alone. So it kind of ended the trip because she did not want to stay. I didn't want to stay. So what we did, we cut our trip short, got home, then we immersed ourselves into the subject of Bigfoot and these creatures. We got online and saw several videos and couldn't really find anything. I saw a lot of like Bigfoot pictures and that. And again, this thing I saw looked nothing like Patterson Gimlin. It looked more like a human, but that demon thing I could never get out of my mind. So again, we immerse ourselves in this. The sad thing about this whole story, which really my world went upside down, is June 15th of 2018 was the Bigfoot encounter. August 15th, 2018, 2 months later, my girlfriend Cindy passed away. Now, I immediately am thinking that this encounter that we had has something to do with it because referring back to that roar, that scream, we both got hit with reverberations, some sort of energy. She flips off the boat, not a very good, very big woman. I thought that had something to do with it. Well, unfortunately, I talked to her mom. We weren't living together, so her mom gave me the bad news, and her mom and I never got along. See, I owned a bar myself, and she was one of these women that was anti Rob. Basically, I was a bar owner. I was a bad man, I guess. We never really hardly spoke. Finally, she tells me that her daughter Cindy had a heart attack. I can't access any autopsies or anything because I'm not family, and her mom. I haven't talked to her mom since. So I went in the dark place. I First of all, I wanted to go back to Cadillac or Lake Mitchell more specifically with the army of black ops guys and just blow up this place and kill this thing. That's how furious I was. It got to the point where I did own a bar at the time, and I went to my bar manager and I said, "Look, I'm taking a leave of absence. Take the money, put it in the bank. Don't rip me off. I mean, I'll be able to monitor stuff from my phone, from the computer. Just please trust me on this and just go about business." Now I trusted this guy who was a partner with me for like at the time, like 6 years. So I just left it at that. I did not go back to work for 6 months. Yeah, literally 6 months. And so throughout this time, I'm trying to piece things together. What is going on with it? So, and I could find nobody to help me. I did not even know that YouTube had like these chat rooms or shows. Like, that's how Bigfoot Michigan Rob came about now, right? It's because I saw an alleged Bigfoot because I still don't know what this thing is 100%. I'm saying Bigfoot. My name's Rob. I live in Michigan. I formed Bigfoot Michigan Rob channel. People were telling me, well, you have to tell your story. I told my story in 2018, and there's like 2,000 views I got like within a couple days. And like, wow. But I still couldn't get, nobody was really there. I didn't have a person to lean on for number one, for fear of judgment, fear of ridicule, fear of making something up. Man, you own a bar, dude. You have to entertain your customers, and it has nothing to do with any of those things. Then I finally came across a group of people that I could trust. This guy, Duke Sullivan, he's a friend of mine. He lives in Montana. He's been a Bigfoot researcher for 50 years. Told me, Rob, you're not going crazy. Yeah, you saw something for sure. He thinks it was a Bigfoot because, as throughout now 5 years of investigation, a lot of these creatures they can change their look. I take these reports, I read them, I do videos on people's encounters, and everything is kind of coming together for me what these things are. But the biggest reason why I started my channel is because I felt like alone. I felt alone. My girlfriend's passed. I've got this story that I've been sitting on. I'm going crazy, not going to work. My parents thought I was nuts. My friends, family, Rob, what's wrong with you? Yes, we know your girlfriend passed away, but I didn't tell them this other story, the underlying story. So I got with my buddy. I met this guy Tex. He had a channel, Texas Front Porch. And so I was asking about how to set up a podcast. So we got together, went through it. So I started my channel, and it started out just to help those people because I was one of those people that is such a lonely experience when you don't feel like you can trust anybody or you don't feel people don't trust you. And then I find out I'm not the only one that's had these experiences. There's hundreds of people, thousands of people, a lot of people like me that hang out to their stories for having told of their stories or their encounters for 15, 20 years. So today I interview researchers, a lot of prominent researchers on my show. I have experiencers like myself that come on and tell their story. I get inundated with emails from subscribers and other people that want me to tell their encounter. And I do that because for me, it was therapy. For them, it's therapy. Me telling someone else's story is therapy. And every time I tell this story, even right now, and I've told this story probably 1,000 times, it always makes me feel better. So my goal now in life, my purpose is to find out as much as I can, but more importantly, is to help that person out there. Because again, I can't reiterate the fact enough. You need some place to go because this could be very traumatic. It was certainly traumatic for me. I risked my livelihood for 6 months, but I finally pulled myself together. Today, I'm back. I'm normal today. Yes, I always grieve the loss, but there's a purpose for me today that I feel, and it's what it is doing this. And that's my story, and that's kind of how I got started with this whole thing.
It's an amazing story. It's thank you for sharing that. It was just really profound. I have a couple
Yeah,
of questions.
yeah.
And because it's the first time I've heard of the metamorphosis to a demonic looking character, can you describe what that looked like?
Yeah, well, again, as I described about the human, originally it looked like the human being with Down syndrome, but an odd person, right? I mean, not like me or you. It looked, but you could tell. Like I said, if I was a hunter, I'm not pulling a trigger because it looked too human. But it had the offset eyes. But when it rolled back, it dropped. The jaw detached. First of all, it drops, and that grayish skin got tight. You could tell the eyes kind of rolled back, and the face changed. You ever see those African like kabuki masks or something of that nature? It looked like something terrifying. It it looked like, if you're looking at a Marvel comic book magazine, it kind of looked like a demon. Now, I'm not suggesting this is what this was, but in my mind, I'm picturing like the picture of the face of the devil with the big nose now. And this is what it was, a flat nose, and everything like protruded on it. It kind of was like 3D, and it kind of that flat face kind of stretched outwardly, and that deep dark mouth. And that's, the best I can describe it because in my head, I can see it right now. In fact, an awesome friend of mine, her name's Sibylla Irwin, she does renditions of Bigfoot, and she is fabulous. In fact, she and I are doing the actual renditions now. She's doing the original and then the demon. And as I explain that to her, that's going to bring to everybody the exact thing that I look like. But again, it looked like a devil. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen, they're called red devil lures, and there's a pig face of the devil on it. It kind of looked like that. And again, for everybody listening, not suggesting that at all. One of the things I've discovered in research, though, if you look at the baboon, first of all, they're ugly as hell to begin with, but they have that face. Now, when they are attacked or when they feel threatened, their face can metamorphose too into like a very unlike what they look like. Their skin pulls back, unlike all their teeth are shown, and they look differently. So when I try to explain people to that, that's kind of what this object is being did. So that's why I'm having my doubts. What is this? What is it? I know it's certainly humanoid. I know it's something that is not natural, right, in the forest. But then again, is Bigfoot natural? That's always up for debate. But the transformation is what got to me. So yes, I'm sorry for the question about, yeah, it looked kind of like a typical like a devil you see on that red devil lure, or kabuki mask from a tribe from Africa. Just very, very sinister looking, very sinister.
How long did you experience that again?
You know, I tell you what, this encounter, if it was 20 seconds or less, it was probably less. It was when I seen I seen, okay, here, if I'm trying to go through like boom, 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 fast, again, I'm processing, you see it, I see it on the shoreline, extends its arms, mouth drops, metamorphoses, yells. At that yell is kind of when I got hit with whatever, black and white. So it was probably seconds, probably 5 to 4 seconds. Because now when I realized I hear her fall into the boat, I'm paralyzed and I look and I can't see correctly. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe shorter. I usually say if this whole episode took 20 seconds or less, probably. If I were to put a timestamp on it, I can't, because one thing that I did mention is kind of the time was very, this encounter seemed, Linda, like it lasted hours. I mean, that's in my mind, that's what it seemed like, but I know it was over in an instant. It's just like time was almost standing still. Didn't lose any time, but it seemed like time was extremely, extremely slow. Just like if you're having a nightmare that you can't wait for this nightmare to end, and it seems like that nightmare is lasting forever. But the average dream is less than 30 seconds, I read somewhere.
As you collected things, got the boat ready, got out of there. Um, what was this creature, this Bigfoot, doing during that time? Were you noticing? Were you paying attention? Did it just go disappear? Did
Well,
it
here's
go back to
yeah,
the woods?
well, here's my thing exactly. Looking at it, I hear her fall off. I go to turn. I'm frozen, can't turn. I go. Now my back is to the shoreline, so I don't see it for this instant. So I turn, I pull her in. And that's why I made mention a little earlier in the story. When I look back is when I was very scared. That thing is now gone. Now I'm thinking in my mind, where is it? Does it swim? Is it after me? Is it swimming toward us? So that's when I immediately turned the boat around, sped right across again, Lake Mitchell to Lake Cadillac to the docking area.
Did you ever go back? I think you said perhaps you went back to look for it.
I've been back. I didn't look for it. I was on the outer side of the woods. I was talking to this person that I got an email from. I went back maybe 2 years ago. It was not on the lake. I found a road that's on the outside of the Manistee Forest. I found a place where you could drive your vehicle. It's kind of like a little interstate. And I seen the woods that backed up to the approximate area where I was. And it was interesting because I ran into a person that lived at Lake Cadillac, and we were talking, and he had told me that he thinks that there's something lurking in the forest, because he was telling me that back in the approximate area where I had the encounter, is that there's a marsh that goes back there. I mentioned earlier in the encounter about Mitchell Creek. He says he's traveled Mitchell's Creek before. He goes, you go back in there and it's very disturbing and very creepy. He said he has found not very expensive boats, maybe just some 8-man rowboats with motors on them, upended on the sides of the banks and left and abandoned there. He's never gotten out to investigate it because back there it's very marshy, so you can't get a good foothold. So I ran into this person. He talks to me like I talk to him every 3 months. He gives me updates. I probably eventually would like to go back, but here's the thing about that. I don't know how I would react if I went back and explored it. I was on the outskirts on the road because it would look like a different environment because I seen it from the back end versus the water. But to go back and actually go through that area and sift through there or attempts to, I don't know. I don't know. I think it'd be disturbing, overwhelming. We never forget the loss of somebody, and Cindy's forever in my heart, but I think that would not be a good memory for me.
Yeah.
And I got to say that I've talked to so many people, much like you, Linda, probably. Most encounters with a Bigfoot have been not bad. I mean, yeah, I collect so much data. You got Bigfoot crossing the road, Bigfoot peering from behind a stump or a tree, Bigfoot threw rocks at their tent, but nothing that just was kind of horrifying. Certainly, I'm not saying Bigfoot had anything to do with the death of Cindy. Today, I don't. I'm past. I don't think. I think that was just her time. I think the heart attack story. If she was gonna have a heart attack, would it not have been? I'm not a doctor. Would it have happened right then and there when she saw that? Right? I don't know. Again, not a physician. I'm not a medical person, but just I don't hear too many stories like this. I mean, I actually seen a physical being metamorphosis from like a humanoid looking Down syndrome into a like I always describe as something demonic, yell, roar, and scream all in unison. Had a filter, got paralyzed. I mean, I got everything all in one on this, and it was very. I didn't go to work for 6 months. I couldn't do anything except grieve but I had a lot of bent up anger, right? Anger. If I'd have went back in those 6 months, I probably would have went berserk, and I probably would have hired a mercenary. I'm half-ass kidding there. Sorry, but yeah, I suffered PTSD. I mean, I even saw psychologists that I finally told my story to, and they even kind of looked at me like, mm-hmm. So, and that wasn't even helpful. So, just the thought of going back there, kind of even right now, it's just I'm gonna leave that off the table.
I've
I
heard
went.
of people, I have heard of people having, well, certainly the PTSD. We just did an episode on one where a man did a real in-depth research project about people who have had these encounters and how it can leave them, of course, with PTSD and other things that are just really traumatizing because it is a traumatic experience at times. And depending on the experience that they had, and just depending upon how that person reacted to it, of course. I guess my question also is: have you run into people who have had this type of paralysis in the midst of this?
Well, people. Yeah, my friend Duke. Now, I don't know that infrasound is something that a lot of animals like the tiger lions, elephants have infrasound. A lot of, or I'm not going to consider an elephant a predator, but they can do this. But a lot of predatorial animals of the woods or the jungle, they can project an infrasound to their prey, and what it does, it puts them in kind of a, a somewhat of a paralysis where they're disoriented, right? And it allows an easier capture or an easier kill for the tiger and the lion on what they're hunting. So that was suggested. Another friend of mine says she got hit with infrasound. She was riding horseback. She sensed that there was a Bigfoot around her because she's a researcher as well. She lives in Idaho, and she got hit with something where she lost all of her senses. In fact, she lost balance and fell off of her horse and ended up breaking her hip. So I've heard of these things. Then I have to go back. I don't think this thing was hunting me though, right? And I've gotten people that I've spoken with. Like I said, Linda, spoke to so many people, researchers now that I now consider friends. Maybe I was in an area of where children were. Maybe its family was there. That's one theory. Another theory is that of maybe it was a rogue. Maybe it was a Bigfoot disbanding, because a lot of Bigfoots are socialized. From what I know, okay, or think or hypothesize is that you've heard that, you know, the Bigfoot is more of a socialized a person. People call them a person, even. I don't know that I go that far, but when they get kicked out of their group, a lot of times they become irritated. They become more hostile because typically together, from what I've heard from many people, Bigfoot pretty much wants to be left alone. I mean, yeah, we stumble across them, and if they want to seek you out, they will seek you out. Like they always, people ask me, how do you find Bigfoot? Well, first of all, I never intended to find Bigfoot at all. He kind of found me. And I think that's how you play that. This other lady, by the way, her name is Cindy, just ironically, got hit by what she says was the infrasound, which kind of made her disoriented, fell off her horse. And then as far as that goes, not a human being. A lot of people that have had anything projected at them when they've heard anything in the woods or think they might have seen a Bigfoot, they've just been hit with nausea, but nothing to the extreme that I described, not the where you can't move at all, not to where you see through a filter. Okay. So, no, I've never had anybody tell me the same identical thing as what happened to me outside of feeling nausea, feeling a little unbalanced, lightheaded. I've heard a lot of stories like that, but nothing that quite where you just can't move. Now, as time goes on, this has happened to me several times in my sitting in my chair watching something. I think, you've heard of sleep paralysis. I got to tell you something. This is kind of off the subject, but it kind of relates. And I've been trying to piece this together because this is maybe a year and a half or two ago. This happened to me twice, all within a 6 month time, where I'm sitting in my house, in one of my rooms where I watch television. It's late at night. And I think I'm awake. I'm watching something. I don't know what it is. And I got this strange sense that something was like in the house. Again, this is not Bigfoot related, but in a sense, it talks about the paralysis, and I think there's something after me in the house. Okay, I whatever that is, I don't know. But I'm awake. I'm watching TV, and I get very scared. I get very scared as to where I yell out, and there's nobody in my house, but I just want to yell. And I cannot all of a sudden I go to get up out of my chair, and now, Linda, I realize I can't get out of my chair. My arms and my legs are frozen stiff in this chair. The only thing I can do is kind of take my eyes and roll them back and forth and look around. And this went on, which again seems like forever, but again, I don't know how long it was. Then I just kind of snapped out of it. Now, did I see in a filter like I did like the Bigfoot experience? No, everything was clear. I'm thinking I'm awake. So that's the closest experience that I had to having that paralysis where I couldn't move. So then, of course, I'm coming up with crazy theories. Did I actually have, did that really happen to me when I was on the boat? Because it was very similar. I dismissed that theory, but I just don't know. Again, if I've gotten 1,000 theories that I've come up with, other people that have tried to help, other researchers, other experiencers, I could probably write a book on theories alone, like we all could. And it's just, it's a mystery.
It is a mystery, I agree. Um, and the more you go down this avenue to try to figure out what it is, how it functions in, the reality that we think we live in anyway, it just gets stranger and stranger.
And this is so cliche to say, but it's so true. The more I learn, the less I know. When you
Yes.
think you've got something, You end up scrapping that. You scrap that whole idea and you start anew. And yeah, it's just like, I mean, I don't even know if these things are from a different dimension, a different realm. I don't know, flesh and blood versus the woo. You've heard of all these stories, I'm sure. I don't even know. I think they're both. Some people tell me it's an ancientized, civilized, not civilized, an ancient people. You get the theory about the hybrid human, right? I mean, what is it? I mean, I don't know. And everybody's experience, the one thing that is common about everything, I know they exist, and I'm not even saying that because I seen one. I tell people, you've heard this. I'm a knower, not a believer. I believed maybe, but now I know they exist. But you've got, and through what I've been doing throughout the last several years, I talk to people all the time. So I do. I this data you collect. 1,000 people are not seeing Bigfoot cross the road saying the same things, right? Or come from behind a tree, and then you get the stories about they see Bigfoot in orbs, or there's been a UFO sighting and a Bigfoot. There's just so much out there that it's so hard to sift through what's real, what's reality, and what's not. That I just have to go on the theory that everything exists, and we're never really going to figure it out. Now, maybe the government knows, but they're not going to disclose any of this.
You have a vast amount of information because you've talked to so many people, and you also have this very unique experience yourself, which
Yeah.
puts you in a often a better position to have some kind of ideas about it or some kind of a theory about it. So what else can you tell us?
From the things that I've learned, here's my thoughts. If you want to know what I think Bigfoot is, I think it's a flesh and blood creature with supernatural abilities. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is this. I talked to Ron Moorhead. I've read his book, The Quantum Bigfoot. I believe that, you know, you can convert mass into energy. That's why these things can travel, it seems like, from dimension to dimension. I had a story about a guy. They were actually trying to find a Bigfoot. They thought they seen a Bigfoot. They're down a stream. I think this was in Colorado. They heard whoops from back in the wood line. They think they seen something run through it, and they had another party 5 miles upstream from them in their area scouting about. And then all of a sudden, this entity in front of this group of gentlemen also was now within seconds 5 miles toward the other party, was doing the same thing. They seen shadows and heard it. My point is this: I think that they can go wherever they want to go. I think they can come in and out of other dimensions and portals. I believe in that. Now, when I say the flesh and blood thing, it also goes back to a friend of mine, that says that if you go back to First Nations believes that they are just a spiritual entity. You've heard the stories about that they protect the woods, or they protect the First Nations people from years ago, but an entity that is not flesh and blood but spiritual. So you've got both sides of that coin. So with the people I've spoke with, I'm coming up to my own personal belief. They are flesh and blood, but they're also spiritual in nature, and they have these innate abilities that we just can't perform or discern. Because you hear the stories about, and I've gotten a story, and I've heard this many times, about they're staring at a stump, they're in the woods. It's a report that I received. A man and a lady, they're looking at this stump from maybe 20, 30 yards away. Then the materials that it transforms, the stump rises up, turns into a shadowy hominoid, walks off into the forest. So even through the experiences that I've had from other people, I've done 125 interviews. In fact, I did my 125th one last Tuesday. A lot of the data that I receive from researchers' experiences, all the same. It's all like, yes, a flesh and blood entity with these abilities. How can they just metamorphose and appear and not appear? How can we walk right past one and look directly at it and not see it? We've all heard of the cloaking. They're certainly not human beings. There's not a human being I know that can cloak or travel from point A to point B in, a matter of seconds, right? I don't even Ron Moorhead, he was talking, he said 25 years ago, Rob, If you would have came up to me and said, I think that Bigfoot's part of the woo, I'd have told you, son, turn around. No such thing. They're flesh and blood creatures. That's Ron Moorhead told me this on an interview. Then he had said, now today, Rob, I think they're a great deal, a great part of the woo, because I think they do have these abilities to manifest into other entities, even shapeshift. So from Ron Moorhead to tell me that he's got 60 plus years experience, I'm going to side with him. So I know I just took your question and turned it into a whole bunch of, maybe it sounds like mumbo jumbo, but it's even hard to just zone in on one thing. So flesh and blood with paranormal abilities. I mean, that's what I gather from these things. That's my personal belief and theory.
Yeah, it was a good answer. It's one that I think a lot of people come to conclude if after a time, especially as like you, I interview a lot of people, not as many as you do, but after a time, it's like you can't presume that all of these people are wrong in the way they're assessing their experience. They're sharing, I think, honestly what they've experienced.
And I think so. And I tell you what, maybe because I seen what I seen, I am more subject to believe a person. But when there's so many commonalities that I look for, people that keep hitting on these same identifying clues, I guess, if you're looking to be a sleuth, right? To see, is this guy pulling my leg? There's just so many commonalities that people bring up from different parts of the world, the country, the United States, right? I'm like, yeah, this person's on to something. They saw something. What? And again, that's the thing. You saw something, but what the hell did you see? Again, I say Bigfoot Michigan Rob. I had a Bigfoot encounter, but what did I really see, Linda? What does that, right? I'm just going with Bigfoot because that's what I started out with in 2018. And people that I talked to think that it probably was Bigfoot, and it just did that. And we revert back to the baboon transformation. But I got to tell you what, that was creepy and ugly. But again, it's a lot of the same commonalities. People just don't. Let me tell you this. Let's just say 1,000 people aren't going to reiterate the same boring stories for 15 minutes of fame. People that have come on my show, first of all, are mostly researchers, but a lot of people send me emails about their experiences that I read. They're not getting anything out of it. I don't give them money. They don't give me money. Rob, I want to be anonymous. Could you tell my story on your show? Yes, I certainly will. I get a response back. Thank you. That helps hearing my story. I'm just too scared to come on and show my face or whatever. And I said, I get that. I was in the same position as you. So yeah, if somebody, and you can tell they're and if you talk to them in an interview, you can tell by the way they speak, if they're genuine, if you can see the emotion in their face. So I don't get a lot of that, I don't think. Now, have I been duped? Probably. We probably all have. But I'm the person that's going to say, I did not walk in your shoes. Therefore, what do you have for me? And I will always have an open ear. So
Exactly. Keep an open mind because we don't really know what we're dealing with here. And until we do, we just have to keep trudging along, getting as much information as we can.
it's about information and data. I never was like this before because, I'm not a scientist. I'm just an average guy, owned a bar for 13 years. Prior to that, I worked for Fords, and now I do this, and I enjoy it. It just keeps me busy. And I'm going to get into the woods. I'm to that threshold now, though, where I like to get out, do some more boots on the ground research for my own evidence, right? I hear so many stories from other people. Now it's time I like to, outside of my encounter, don't that's pretty big, but I like to investigate this a little more. And I think that's what I'm going to do a lot more of here this summer going into next year because there's just so much. I mean, I know, okay, when I started doing this, we're talking Bigfoot. Now I'm talking Dogman. I'm talking UFOs. We're talking aliens. We're talking realms, dimensions. I mean, Bigfoot turned into about thousands different subjects, which are all fascinating. And the thing I will say about this is I think they're all related. If you just want to share out my channel, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, that'd be great. And I will definitely share you out because I do watch your channel. I stumbled across your channel maybe a couple months ago. You've got some great ones. I really like the one with Scott Nelson, that talking about Ron Moorhead about the
Mhm.
Bigfoot language.